All right. Oh, Miscreants. Miscreants. So this is kind of, there's nothing that I wouldn't want to gush over about this album. It's just, it's hard to approach this without going a little bit overboard with my appreciation for it. But why? Well, uh, okay, let's look at the album cover. You'll see the score and everything. It's basically Unquestionable Presence, right? If you don't, that's the second Atheist album. This is very much a thrash metal band who were playing kind of like an mid '80s creator style thrash, a little bit blackened, a little bit death metal, but '80s thrash metal. And they in 2018 they pivoted and they started playing early progressive death thrash metal. Uh, that sounded like Atheist. It very much just kind of was in that style right away. They like Hell Witch, they like Oblivion. Do I need to keep naming my favorite bands in a row? It's not quite Cynic. All right, so it is very much the sort of elastic, quickly snapped, wheeling between ideas, full of riffs, very enthusiastic and well played style of progressive death metal that really Atheist is responsible for. Um, the bassist is clearly a fan of that style over the more Steve DiGiorgio school of bass playing. So that's what differentiates this from like a Suppression or some of their other label mates, like Ripper. The most recent Ripper album or EP was a good example of a little bit more DiGiorgio and less of the sort of early Atheist style. Uh, so yeah, this is the best way to sum it, and I know that it's reductive, but think of the sort of X Thrasher explosion of ideas sound of Unquestionable Presence. Uh, the the a vocal range that is basically Martin Van Drunen era Pestilence, and we're talking the first album, and then a lot of guitar work that creeps in that is very Chuck Schuldiner, early Death. Let's think post-Human. The guitar style really changed after Human, so I chose to talk about individual thought patterns here. If you can remove again the DiGiorgio side of the more elaborate songs, the more free flowing ideas that came from working with Cynic around that time. So if you heard their split with Vile Apparition, which I think just landed on vinyl finally after many months of delays, which is a pretty normal thing these days, you'll understand exactly what this album sounds like. It is a half an hour album. That is the tradition with what they're working in. It's the it's the mold that they're filling. And I hate to say it that way, but if you consider, I spend a whole paragraph here and quite a long one going over some of the notes that I have for bands that were post Unquestionable Presence. And the best being Scenery, a Czech band who put out a couple of albums in the late 90s and early 2000s, was very much in the style of Atheist, just in the same way Miscreance emulates the logo and the artwork. So does Scenery. Their logo is just, it's hand drawn just to look like Atheists. Um, we can consider bands like Pavor, not quite get there. Uh, I name a couple of other sort of random, not random, but like obscure groups. And the point I'm making there is that there is a level of emulation here. They're recreating atheists style because it is such a paradigm shift. It is such a you'll feel it when you return to that record. Same with Focus and things like that, where it's not only was it ahead of its time, but it hasn't really ever been mastered since. The bands themselves cannot recreate what they did before. It really was a product and an anomaly in its time. What's so exciting about this record for me and why I gave it such a good score is because they've actually done a very good job of it. They've actually recreated that sensation without, they don't have as many ideas as Atheist had stored up by the time they put out their second album, but they come pretty close. and that's something worth celebrating. I think we get into songs like The Garden, which sounds a bit like Oblivion, and we get into Alchemy right after it. This is where the sort of pocket of the album hits. It's where like I want to keep listening to it. I want to kind of go back and listen to it again. I'm staring at that album art. I'm sort of like, this is it's rad. It's cool. It's like I have to keep listening to it. They kind of hook me there, and I'm going to listen to it again in a half an hour. I'm going to listen to it again for a half an hour after that. It's such an easy record to pick up, and so that really fed into my recommendation where it's like, yeah, I don't really care that it's not that original at all. Like it's just a great record to pick up and play if you like old school progressive death metal. And I think it will generally appeal. It's kind of it was being pushed by a couple of people I saw like reviewing it in videos. They were saying that it was a thrash record. It's really not a thrash record. It's a death thrash record that is very much in the style of progressive, mostly Florida based death metal that is very much an anomaly still. And so this is a contribution very much worth checking out. I think it's done better than most in this style. And if you care that it's not original, what are you doing listening to metal at all? There's just breaking the mold is probably you wouldn't go to this sort of style to break the mold anyway. So uh, it's just I think it's probably one of the best, if not the best, record out in September for my taste. It's my favorite type of music, you know, so that counts for something. There might be bigger records before the end of the month, but this is one that I'm stuck on. It's the one I'm going to keep listening to. I'm going to get that vinyl right away. It's sort of like the big event for me this month is probably this album. There's a couple more, but we'll get to those pretty soon. So for now, this is a big recommendation. It's a very high recommendation, and I think it really universally speaks to all the things that I like about death metal, thrash metal, technical thrash metal, progressive death metal, all these things, and does it in an authentic and I find it like an exciting and inspired way. So I couldn't be glowing more there unless I upped the contrast on my cheap ass camera. So go check it out.